All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm sure we'll have a lot more coming in over the next minute or so. We will get started here in probably about 30 seconds. We'll let a few more people funnel in, and then we will start talking about evals. All right. Let me share my screen, and we will kick this off.
Hey everyone, welcome to the workshop.
All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. The last workshop, I shared the wrong screen first, and so it took a while for someone to tell me. So hopefully you'll drop in the chat if you can't see it. And let's get started. So let's talk about what the goal of this workshop is. So thanks everyone for registering. Our goal is to build and run evals, and you should learn a lot about evals along the way. And then we'll also show you how you can use this within Mastra itself. So even if you're not using Mastra, you should get a lot out of this, but you'll also hopefully leave with the knowledge that it's really easy to do if you are using Mastra. So as far as what we're going to learn today, we're going to go over an overview of evals and AI applications. We'll learn how to leverage off-the-shelf evals with your AI agents. We'll learn about using an LLM as a judge in your evals, how to write some custom evals, and how to tie those to business results, and then how to build some test suites as well. So let's go through who we are. So I'll go first. So I'm Shane Thomas. I'm Chief Product Officer and founder at Mastra. I was originally, in product and engineering at Gatsby and at Netlify. I built a product called AudioFeed, and I've been doing open source stuff for over 15 years when I first started kind of doing some contributions to Drupal of all things. So you can, follow me on Twitter or, connect with me on LinkedIn. And Abi, go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm Abi. I was a principal engineer at Gatsby, built Gatsby Cloud, worked at Netlify as well, and then I'm CTO here at Mastra. I've never seen snowfall, which is a running joke in this Mastra universe we're creating here up in San Francisco. That's because I was born in Los Angeles. We don't see snow over there. And what do I want is 13 stars on GitHub. 13K stars. We already got 13.
And,
Thanks.
and a little backstory on the snow. We always do this example in all these workshops, and when we're giving demos, our base example in Mastra is a weather agent. And so somehow it came up one day when it was very cold where I'm from, which is Sioux Falls, South Dakota, that Abi has never seen snowfall, which I have seen a lot of. Okay, so let's talk about if you need evals. Greg Brockman seems to say that evals are surprisingly often all you need. And yeah, we're going to talk about why. And I have a really image here. This is from Hummel.dev. If you haven't been following his stuff and you're interested in evals, he has a lot of really good thoughts. I agree with most of them, not all of them, but most of them. He's very good at breaking down kind of the eval space. So, there's some links at the end to some of his blog posts on evals. And I would highly recommend, if you want some further reading, go read some of his stuff. But in this case, you can see in this diagram that essentially you're building this cycle around evals where you integrate some evals into your product. You go through these steps of running the evals, improving, running the evals, improving, and you kind of want to decrease that feedback loop between improving evals and how that kind of funnels into improving your overall results of AI. Because, our goal is to improve those results over time, right? We want to make sure that as new models come out, as we change our system prompts, as we pull in more data or give our agents or applications more tools or more autonomy, that it's actually making things better and not going backwards. I constantly if you're using, if any of you are using like Cursor or Windsurf, you might realize that sometimes it feels like it got worse. Sometimes it feels like it got better. And that's because all this AI LLM stuff is non-deterministic, right? It's very hard to test every possible use case. But what we should be doing is testing at least some of them, making sure that we are getting better over time. So it's less likely that we have those regressions for some of our users where it seems like things are working great one day. Now it's not as working good for the same thing you were doing last week. And so, yeah, this is done through quick feedback cycles and kind of increasing how quickly you can iterate. So we'll talk a little bit about types of evals. So there's often like unit tests. Sometimes these are kind of tied into something called behavior tests, but you have an input and output and you want it to kind of match an expected results. So you want to verify that the LLM responds correctly across a wide range of different prompts. You have some metrics-based evals. We'll talk about some of those today, but they're more quantitative measurements. Sometimes these are, I like to call them off-the-shelf evals. You can kind of pull in, you can use them for specific use cases. Probably don't want to use too many of them, but you do want to try to tie them to making sure that over time things are not regressing. And then we have this idea of judges or, someone kind of actually judging the output. And this could be through human evaluation, which is typically the most expensive, but typically the best, or LLM as judge, where you can actually use an LLM to judge the response. You do have to do some calibration maybe and provided examples, but over time you can kind of reduce some of the human evaluation you need. It doesn't mean you can completely get rid of it, but maybe you don't need to rely on it quite as much. If we want to talk a little bit about unit testing, it's kind of similar to traditional software unit tests. A lot of the stuff that you've done with traditional software engineering or software development hasn't really changed. It's just a little different. Very similar to if were building software and then you were introduced to DevOps or, something like that, where now you got to learn some new principles, but it's still software development at the end of the day. AI is very similar to that. During unit tests, you'll often use an LLM to generate test cases, often called synthetic data. And unlike traditional unit testing, your pass rate might vary a bit because the LLM is not deterministic. So you'll set the bar of what you want your pass rate to be. And over time, you want to make sure you don't go below that, but know that there'll be some variance because you're not always going to be able to have something that's with 100% predictability. And you'll typically want to run these in CI or part of a process that allows you to validate frequently that this is not going backwards. So here's some just kind of examples, really simple, of what this might look like. Let's say I wanted to build an agent that gets the weather. We just talked about how Abby's never seen snow. But you might have a bunch of different ways in your sample data or of how someone might ask for the weather. What's the weather in this city? Can you tell me the weather? Weather in this city? And you might have a whole bunch of different sample ways that someone might ask for that. And then you'll have a test that would say, did the response contain the city name? Was the correct weather tool actually called? Was the tool status 200 and did it have actual results? So you can kind of think of how you would script something like that to make sure that when you run this test suite, all those different variations are run and all the data is kind of validated that it came back and was run correctly. Another task example could be go out and research a sales lead. So you might have an array of pairs of this is the input and this is the expected output. Where did John Smith work before Apple? Maybe he worked at Amazon. So you expect that Amazon is going to be either in that response or the exact response, depending on how that you structure your prompts and whether you're using structured output or something like that. And when did Jane Smith start at Google? You're looking for the specific date needing to be there. So you might want to run tests that say the response contains the correct factual data, the correct tool was called, whether that's looking it up in your database, whether it's doing a web search, using a LinkedIn API, whatever your tool would be in this case, you'd want to make sure that it actually called the right tool for these types of prompts. So you can see how you can piece together and run these kind of tests on different parts of your application. Another important thing when you're thinking about evals is it's often called LLM ops or AI ops. It's not just running tests, it's also making sure you can debug things as you go. So you want to have something that allows you to do tracing. which essentially says anytime there's a request to one of your LLM calls or your agents, you can look through and see these are all the steps that happened. You can see the inputs and outputs of every step, and this helps you debug and makes it easier for you to iterate and make improvements on your application. We have a whole bunch of different metrics in Mastra, but there's a lot of different types that you could find kind of out in the wild. These are typically quantitative metrics. They might be NLP or natural language processing based or LLM based, meaning you use an LLM as a judge for some of these things. You should be selective about metrics you choose. I think Abby and I kind of had a video online where, we were talking about whether off-the-shelf metrics are useful or not. And so I think there's some it depends on your use case. They can be useful, especially over long periods of time where you're seeing how things are either trending up or trending down. But in any individual, code push or something, maybe those metrics don't mean that much. But over time, in aggregate, they definitely can. But so you do really want to monitor those results over time, look for significant changes, and figure out why results might be going one way or the other. When we talk about judges, we have kind of a human judge or an LLM as the judge. Human judges could be users of your product. Sometimes you'll see if you use ChatGPT or a lot of similar types of those products, there's a thumbs up or thumbs down. Like, was this a good response or not? They're actually using that information to feed back as evals into uh, the training of their models, right? And so if you think on a smaller scale, you might have something like that as well. If you provide something to your user and they say this was good, well, then you know that that was a good enough response because typically users are only going to respond one way if they're only going to give you a thumbs up if it was really good or a thumbs down if it was probably not very good at all. Most people won't do anything if it's in the middle. So you'd kind of use that as kind of training data or eval or data for your evals to make sure that as you improve things, those types of responses uh, are still not going backwards. They're still as good. You can have experts as well. So there's, we're currently in Y Combinator, and so there's a company that's doing more financial data, and it needs to use very specific tax laws when it's answering questions. And so they have to have someone with that background that can validate that whatever their application is returning is right. And so they spend a lot of time, a lot of money making sure that it's providing factual information. So in this case, they're using an expert. And then, of course, that feedback is used in those test cases. An LLM as a judge is you just use an LLM to grade. This, because it's a little bit more automatable, you don't just need like a pass or fail typically. You can use some kind of a scale. And you'll also want to probably use the best LLM for this. So whatever the newest model is, whatever the most expensive model is, that's usually your judge because it'll have the most comprehensive ability to reason through this stuff. But you do need to calibrate the LLM with human feedback, with examples, and making sure that over time your LLM judge is responding very similar to what your expert or what your user would actually do. So let's talk a little bit about Mastra. Mastra is an open source AI agent framework for TypeScript. It has things like tools, memory, and tracing for agents. It has a state machine based workflows, so you can build really like agentic workflows that can pause and resume if you need humans to kind of interact with things. So you can kind of have that human in the loop. It has evals. It has storage for RAG, or retrieval augmented generation pipelines, so you can pull data in from anywhere. We also have a nice local development playground, which you'll get to see a little bit today. And yeah, I don't know how we can turn off this annotation. Abby, can you figure out how to turn that off? I don't know. I mean, I guess you're not a disable annotations. Okay. And I don't know how to remove it though. I'll figure that out in a second. Yeah. Okay. We can just keep going. All right. So the idea is Mastra is supposed to be opinionated but flexible. That's really our goals when we built Mastra. It's an open source framework, so we want to have opinions so you don't have to make a lot of decisions right away. but we don't want to lock you into those decisions. So you can, of course, just swap things out and replace things as you go. And we really want to empower you to get further faster. So you can hit the ground running, you can get something out the door really quickly, and then you can uh, get really far and then swap in different things as you need and as you get more sophisticated with your application. But we're going to go ahead and create some evals. And we're going to talk about what tone consistency, answer relevancy, and hallucination evals are. We'll talk, obviously, gonna apparently talk about why off-the-shelf evals are trash, as I kind of alluded to a little bit. We're gonna talk about building a judge, talk about bringing it all together, and then, yeah, we'll get excited about some things. So I'm gonna stop sharing and hand it over to Abby,
Hello
and,
again.
and we'll go from there. Take it away.
Okay, lot to go through, not much time, but we will do it. Okay, so this is a Mastra project. I'm not going to go through the setup process. We have a workshop for the basics. I would attend that one or review it. Before I go any deeper, I want to say that doing evals is not, it's kind of like an experimental territory that we live in. But it is all very much scientific, right? It's just the method of just iteration and, trying hypotheses out and making them work. So I will say that the things that we're going into, we're probably going to do an evals part two because right now, what I want to show you guys is how do you get into the iteration loop where you can just execute the scientific method, right? Test things, try something out, see if it changes, have some heuristic, right? So I'll go through from simple to everything more complex, but in reality, there's so much more to learn. Even we're learning every day. So, okay, disclaimers aside, let's get into it. First, I want to talk about NLP metrics. So natural language metrics are been used forever. And there's so many of them off the shelf that if your product does care about how things are structured with language, those are really nice evals to do. Like maybe your LLM responses are really mean or mean-spirited. Maybe that requires you to change your prompt a little bit. Maybe you're trying to have a neutral tone, right? So this tone consistency metric, as an example, is something that will just measure the tone based on a semantic uh, like a search, NLP library, which does sentiment analysis. Um, so how you set up off-the-shelf metrics in Mastra are very easy. We have a Mastra evals package. So you would just install Mastra evals. And then within the NLP uh, kind of section of that library, we have so many other ones here. You can essentially see completeness, content similarity, keyword coverage, textual difference. Now, this only matters if you're dealing with language and like that's important, right? But if you're expecting your agent to do things, maybe that's not as important rather than the actions it takes. But let's keep going. So how you set this up, you create a new tone consistency metric. And then I have just a simple agent that, I have this fake company called Quantum Tech, and it's like kind of like a customer support assistant bot. And then the cool thing about evals or just anything in Mastra is it's all JavaScript. So if we wanted to write a test on this, we could. And in this test, I have a bunch of test cases. We're using Vitest, by the way, it's pretty fast. But you could use anything you want, like Jest or Mocha or whatever the new flavor is, because it's just JavaScript. So in this test, I have a bunch of queries. And this is usually how an eval kind of goes. You have inputs and outputs, very much like a unit type of test. What quantum computing services do you offer? Can you explain quantum entanglement? And then, it keeps crashing. These are all kind of support questions. And we should maintain a consistent tone. So what you can do first is we take our agent that we set up in our tone example here. And we gave it that system prompt. And then what we can do, and I'll make this bigger. No, never mind. A little too big. We'll generate a response from the agent based on our query. And we'll get the response, and then we'll need to measure its based on our metric. So we have our tone consistency metric. Metrics in Mastra are very simple. They have this function called measure. And in this case, we're going to take the input, which was the original thing that we asked, and then the text that was returned, measure it, and we'll get the essentially the sentiment scores from the NLP library. And then it's up to you to kind of figure out like what that means to you, right? As the developer. So let's run this thing. I think I have it skipped. And let's do, oops.
And Abby, we're just seeing your editor. I don't know if
Yep, I'm
you're.
about to share that right now. Sorry, my bad. This is what I wanted. Okay, and let's test the course. Actually, I'll just run test. Okay. Oh, because it's running another one. I'll skip this. We're going to come to that soon. All right, so it's going to do the tone test. And so the problem, like the first problem you'll see is like this test is not really deterministic because the generate is going to generate a different response every time, right? But and so look, something failed. That's really cool. Let's actually inspect all this and I'll give you like the kind of takeaway. So let's go to like the first one. So the query was like, what quantum computing services do you offer? And obviously all this stuff is fake, right? Because there is no quantum tech. So it just made up a response. But that's not what we're testing here. We're testing tone. So it gave it's cool, like pretty lengthy response. And then the tone info is the like response sentiment is 0, which means it's like neutral. And then the reference sentiment is like a difference. And then when you essentially have that difference, you can then convert that into a score. There's this algorithm in the library you could take a look at that populates the score. Um, I'm not really an expert at sentiment analysis, but for this example, here we are. So yeah, it scored like 0.92. I guess that is good, right? Because as the interpreter of the score, it's kind of up to you to determine if that's good or not. Because like maybe you want tone always to be like always to be 0, or maybe you want it to be positive always, right? Then you would need to then tweak the prompt. But okay, let's keep going. So most of these are the same, but the one that failed had a negative tone, right? And then let's see, like it doesn't seem like it, but hey, um that's kind of how it went. And the trend here with these types of tests is like if you want to run tests in CI for evals, I would instead trying to test if things are correct, you should test if things are wrong. And the emergency case wrong. Because like if the scores are going to change every run, you can't really be sure. Maybe you can't really think of like it as a score. You have to think of it as a range or like maybe it passed, maybe it didn't, versus like you could just say like it didn't fail. I know this is not a good thing to say, but like it's kind of the reality of what this is. Let's go to another one. So this was NLP based. I think NLP based is not that great. Because even if you got a score as the interpreter, I don't even know what the reasoning behind it is because I have to be some sentiment analysis expert to understand this, or I'll go read about it, right? That's why we're gonna get into the next one, which is like LLM as judge. So for LLM as judge, and once again, LLM as judge means you are passing a model to the metric. You're essentially making the metric into an agent under the hood because it can do a lot of things. But then you're basing it still on a like there's like logic within the metric that determines how to score the response. So answer relevancy is based on um, you have the inputs, and then based on the response, it's going to see if the answers are relevant. And it's going to just judge that. And let's see. And the relevancy is based on the question, right? Is based on the question, is the answer relevant? Now, once again, is that even valuable to test? I don't know. It could be. Doesn't seem like it, but this is just a good intro example. So I'm just trying to poke this thought throughout this whole thing. So same kind of deal as last time. I put a lot of comments here because I want to show how you could essentially improve this. So this is like the future. But you also see that we're using, O3 mini for our model. Because, I didn't want to do too expensive a model for the workshop here. Answer relevancy has like this uncertainty weight. You can like kind of weight the responses. You're going to see that it's going to kind of be all over the place. But yeah, same type of thing. We're Tech Gadget Inc. We're going to ask some questions to it. And let's just run these tests. Same kind of deal. There's all kind of like same JavaScript testing type of situation. These three questions. We'll do the generate and measure, same type of measurement. So even if you're using an LLM as judge, the metric still is like a measure function, and it's still inputs and outputs. But this time, we get a reason, and I'm really curious to know. And the reason may not be something we like to hear, and we'll have to like understand how to fix it, but it's kind of interesting. So let's run this one. So I'll unskip this one. Let's go back and skip this one here. Okay. And back here, just keep this code open. Let's run test again. This one might take a little bit longer. We'll see. Because it has to do two generate calls, right? One is the agent call that you're making, and then the metric itself has to go do it. So we'll see. I probably should have put a progress bar or something.
And because you're using O3, there's some advanced reasoning going on. So it's not the fastest model.
Yeah. We can try it with a different model too, after this run.
But it is very common for you to want to use typically the best models when you're doing your evals. But you're probably thinking as you're seeing this, won't this get expensive? There's a lot of LLM calls just to test that things are working. And to be quite honest, yes, depending on your situation, you have to weigh how important is quality and accuracy versus the costs of having to run these tests. And so that determines like how often do you actually run them? Do you run them every time you commit code, or do you run them once a day, once a week? You'll have to really be thoughtful about that.
And they can time out, as we just saw. But we'll go through some of the ones that didn't. I can add a timeout too. But here's the thing, like, right? Like, let's just say like this example is so trivial, but it's to show, right? This is just to show stuff off. But if you were to have to test a real agent that does a lot of stuff, like how much are you willing to pay for testing? Because every test is like $5, let's just say. We have an internal agent that we run evals on, and this one day it went off the rails, and we paid $5 every 30 minutes, and we didn't know that where it came from or something. And that was, we were like, who's spending all this money? Oh, it was the evals. That's what was happening. I just say this to keep you all informed, poking the thought, as I like to say. Let's get back to this. So let's go through these questions and the answers. So how do I reset my factory settings? Obviously, it made it up again, but that's cool. And the answer is relevant because, based on the question, the answer is relevant. I would agree with this one. So that's cool. Is it valuable? I don't know. When will the new tech gadget be released? Above 50% is not bad, right? I don't think, the scale here is up to you, but if it's above 50% in this trivial example, it's probably okay. Anyway, we can keep going on this. Not really valuable, but let's push one more. Let's do one more example that is even more interesting about off-the-shelf evals, which is hallucination. Um, and this one, yeah, this one's going to be a treat. Okay, the mechanics are the same. So hallucination, it's a metric. You get it from the LLM lib in our evals library. Super chill. You use the same type of model. In this case, for hallucination, the inputs are like the context of what your agent should know. So in this case, I just put a bunch of text here, like as different key facts. So the thing though is like agents are known to hallucinate a lot. And that's why context is super important. The more context you have, the less it'll hallucinate. So you have to kind of like give guardrails to your agents, like what it can do. But like, is it really valuable to test hallucinations? Potentially, but it's like, how are they scored? And so my point up until this point is off-the-shelf evals are trash because like, as I've said, each one is like, it depends, it depends, it depends. And so let's test this hallucination one, and we'll see if it actually does well at hallucinations. And just spoiler alert, I found a bug in this off-the-shelf eval, and we got the logic from like a paper. So it's like maybe we just didn't implement it properly. But I'll show it to you. Let's go into it. So everything's set up the same way. Hallucination metric, send it a model, give it the inputs that it needs. The test is the same thing as other ones. That's how you would test it. Let's run it. Same kind of deal. You generate the response from your agent. You pass it into measure, inputs, outputs, scores, and reasons. So as much as I'm hating on evals, the evals that we have, like the mechanics are super easy, right? And so once you start doing your own evals, at least you have the good mechanics to like to push forward. So let's run this. It's gonna take once again a time. So I'm Shane, if you want to like add any color here while we wait. I probably will not wait for all of them because it will take a while. But yeah.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to these off-the-shelf evals can be important, again, if you know what you're actually measuring, which is why at the end of the day, what you should think about is what are the business results you actually want to accomplish, and how do you measure that? And some of these might fit into that, and they might, especially over time, give you information that says, okay, we do understand what this is doing, and we want to make sure that as we improve models or we change our system prompts for our agents or we add more data that, through RAG or something, that it doesn't go backwards. But again, you should be, I think there's this tendency for people to see all these off the shelf evals and add all of them, right? It'd be pretty easy to just grab them and add all of them. And then you almost have too much data where too much data is almost worse than having no data at all because it's hard to make decisions if you're flooded with too much information. So just make sure you're being selective about the evals and make sure you have a real reason for wanting to use it and what it's trying to measure. And then in that case, it's much more meaningful to whatever the business results you're actually trying to drive. Because my guess is if you're here, you're trying to build something and you want to measure if it's working. And in order to do that, you want to make sure that you're not spending too much time on information that's not actually going to help you accomplish that. Did I
Cool.
do it? Did I do a good enough job stalling, Avi?
Yeah, I mean, I also put the model to GPT-4o because I was too lazy to wait.
All
We
right.
can point the point across. As you can see, it's running. We'll just go through one of these. So the question was like, how has quantum technology evolved since their first quantum computer? Now, once again, this is a question that, like, outside the context it was given, should not be like we gave it some really jank context, right? If we look here, we gave it some basic stuff, so it shouldn't answer outside of that. And that's kind of where there's like maybe there's like a disagreement. Like, would you consider if I gave you this context, this list of context, and it didn't say anything wrong about that list of context, is that considered a hallucination? But what if it adds some stuff that wasn't in this context? Is that hallucinating? Oftentimes we see this in our own lives with using Claude or even Windsurf or Cursor or any of the tools. Like you kind of can fact check the things that you know, but then sometimes you don't know the thing that it's telling you may or may not be wrong. So hallucination tests are good, but then you have to have a lot of context. As we can see, this one was good. This one was good because it said that it didn't say anything out of the context that like contradicted that context. But it also added some stuff about scalability and roadmap that I didn't even say. It doesn't have the context for that. So this could be a false positive. And that's the bug I found in this hallucination stuff. You have to make sure that it only looks into the context. But even with that bug resolved, is this a valuable eval? I don't know. It depends. And that's like the worst answer in software engineering. Okay, let's move on to something maybe more valuable, which is doing it yourself, like making your own metrics. So LLM as judge, what does that mean in practice, at least in the Mastra framework? We have a primitive called the Mastra agent judge. Kind of wordy, but kind of cool sounding if you ask me. And what it is it's just a Mastra agent that's job is to evaluate anything that you want. And usually when they say LLM as judge, they don't really kind of consider that you could, like you could kind of just manipulate this thing as much as you want, just like any other, agent that you're building. And what we realized, and this is kind of like the negative and positive of all this, you probably will spend a lot of time building your judge. It won't be as expensive as a human judge, but you'll probably put a lot of time and effort into building your judge, because that's truly the thing that will evaluate if you're doing well. And another point about judges before we continue, a judge's purpose is to evaluate things and give you reasons for why certain responses were good and why certain responses were bad. The score is not for some trophy, right? The score is to take the ones that were really good and put them back into your system prompt. That way you are adding that context we're talking about. Every good example goes back into the system prompt, and even bad examples go back into the system prompt or any other prompting that you're going to do. Because as we've learned is the more context and knowledge you give this thing, the better it performs. But the problem is if you're starting at time zero, you have no context or knowledge from anybody. And you can't make it up. I mean, we always try, right? That's what testing is all about, synthetic data and stuff. But if you can get it from your users and you have like kind of an iteration cycle where you're judging stuff, or maybe, you have a human expert judging them, they all go back into, it's like a circle. It goes right back into the agent. So that's just, okay, I'll get off my high horse and let's keep going. So in the same way as agents, judges have system prompts as well, or we call them instructions, but it's a system prompt. And for my example, I made a customer quality agent, right? So what it's supposed to do is it's going to judge the responses a customer support bot gives a person needing help. And once again, not the craziest example, but it's a test harness, right? That allows you to get into an iteration loop. Because you could like follow what I've done and I published the code, it's on GitHub. You could just follow what I've done and like kind of put your own stuff in there and get into an iteration loop with your own code and see where it takes you. So my judge here, I'm judging the responses based on correctness. And here's a tip, do not use numerical scores as the way you're going to judge something. Because numbers, it's funny because numbers, LLMs don't really do well with numbers, like numerical kind of assignments, which is weird. And also like, and that's kind of from my experience and like from what I'm reading, like don't take it like as absolute truth. But it also does better when you kind of have these like textual representations. So like, for example, in my thing, I made a rubric called poor, good, excellent. To me, those mean numbers because I'm a human and I like numbers. But from a to a LLM, text is better. So poor, good, and excellent, in theory, will be a better assignment. And I only would know that from doing this and then fail like it. actually like judging things wrong, and then you have to kind of think about it. Once again, you're working on your judge a lot too. So correctness, poor, good, excellent. I gave it examples of what a poor thing looks like, a good one, excellent one. This could evolve over time as I start learning other poor examples and stuff. And that'll come back into my judge, and then it'll make it better. Completeness, this is all like cookie cutter stuff, but it's cool. Clarity, same kind of deals. All right, that's kind of the prompt. How do you set up a judge? Well, you can extend the agent judge because the agent judge is what runs all the off-the-shelf evals. But if you want to like do your own thing, you just extend it and then you pass your model in. We have two methods you need to implement: evaluate, which is the input for like the customer query, and then which the agent response is. And this is kind of where it's up to you. Like, how do you evaluate? Well, you're going to use your agent and make like a quality evaluation prompt. So it's like, please evaluate these things. And then based on that system prompt I wrote and like establish my grading system, I want it to return this in a specific structure, right? And then um, using our agent generate function through Mastra, you can then assemble this into an object and then can assemble it. I don't have some TypeScript thing going, so please ignore this, but it'll run. And then there's some other methods, just like this is just JavaScript again. Like I made these methods because I need helper methods, just like the way I like to write code. The only required things I had to do were to do evaluate and get reason. Because I was mentioning earlier, scores and reasons are the thing that make you like not go insane. So you need to also have like a reasoning prompt as well. So like explain the reasoning, explain the structure, like this is how I want you to do it. What's the overall score? Give me some recommendations on how to improve it. These all came from the previous evaluation. And then now it needs to given all the evaluation data, make this into something that I can reason about. And once again, you have to iterate a lot here too, right? And it depends on like what kind of team you're on, the wording, like it's everyone. This is very much like a personal thing that you would want to do. We can like kind of recommend what we like to do, but everyone has preferences. And then lastly, we do the same kind of structuring, and I added some more methods because I like that. So we'll come back for questions here, but let's look at this in the wild in my actual test. So I had to so the judge is one part, but judges can do multiple metrics if you wanted it to. So like I made a metric, like a one-to-one metric to judge, but like you could technically make multiple metrics from a specific judge. We have a metric. The cool thing about Mastra is like everything's just very extendable and like JavaScript like friendly. So if you're like really good at JavaScript or like understand the language very well, you can do whatever you want. Because you can just extend metric here, and then we have some required methods to implement like measure. We were looking at that before, and that's pretty much all you have to implement is measure. So it's up to you. So in our case, right, we evaluate. We are a judge. We get the scores. We want, like in our case, I like helper methods that help me do stuff. And then I get the reason from our get reason thing, and then I return it here. And then I could do any number of metrics that I want from a singular judge. It's up to you. I think it's pretty cool if you want to explore that. Just some caveats, like don't do a lot of it. Like don't do a lot of different types of evaluations in one judge because you won't, your mileage may vary. Okay, let me wrap this all up real quick. So we have our quality metric test, same as all the other things I was showing you. Test cases for each one. We're going to measure them. Sorry, I'm just going fast because we're kind of running out of time. But yeah, just metric.measure. I'll run it. And I got to, what was the last one we ran? This one. Let's run this one. And what's cool when I wrote this, what's cool is like I created the rubric, right? So it's cool like seeing it like your rubric actually get like implemented. I don't know, makes you feel some type of way.
A- And the other thing that, if you're looking at that and you're thinking, wow, that was a kind of a lot of code just to run this judge, right? Just to run this someone to or some LLM to judge the outputs of these tests. And it kind of is. But you have to also think of it this way. If over time you can have less reliance on the human expert providing the feedback, which takes a lot of time, is can be expensive. It's really challenging to get that feedback sometimes, and you can rely more on the LLM to do more of it. Again, I don't think it'll ever completely replace it because you want that human feedback in the loop, but it is worth spending a little time improving your judge because you can of course automate a lot of this stuff that you wouldn't be able to if you didn't spend that extra time.
As you can see from the results here, like it broke down the response and then gave me the reasons that I was looking for. I was trying to judge on correctness and then the examples, how to improve it, completeness, etc. So it's cool. It's like what I wanted. Now, the question is, do I agree? And as the human expert, I'm the one who created this monster. Do I agree with its reasoning? I do, personally, but it's up to you. And if you don't, then you got to go tweak it, right? This is like Frankenstein's monster about to go judge all your stuff. You probably should get it tuned up a little bit. Okay, so then finally, we have all these metrics and stuff. I'm going to put them all together into a customer support agent. And also, let's just, for sake of not being slow, once again, this is all the stuff we went through, and I put it on. Um, okay, so this is kind of the next part here. When we put it all together, you can run metrics and evals in test files. That's cool. It's probably for emergency scenarios, like you're testing for failures, not successes. But what we think is you should just be evaling in production, like as things are happening. And how you do that is you just pass your evals to your agent like this, and any generate call that happens in the background, we will just like you will be collecting evals and however you do it, like whatever metrics you want to do. I'll show you a demo of this. So npm dev. This starts Mastra Playground, which is dope, by the way. Um, you can see my quantum tech customer support agent is right here. Let's chat with it. And what if I did it like when quantum tech for? Cool. I mean, obviously, I didn't know what to expect there, but let's just see how it evaled across all the evals we did. So in Mastra Dev and in Mastra Cloud, spoiler alert, you can do tracing. So 1 second, I think I have to refresh this. No. Here, sorry. You can do tracing. This is like our tracing UI. I think, okay, here it is. So like that was the stream I just did. There's a little lag on my side. So that was the stream we just did. We can see like everything that happened. Also, my stuff has like memory enabled. I added Mastra memory. We're gonna have a workshop on that, so this might all just be uh, unclear to you now. But through this, you can see like just everything that gets called. And sometimes, and this is kind of us inserting stuff into the database, what's cool about tracing is sometimes you're evaluating an agent if it did something or not. And it could say it did it. Like it could say, oh yeah, I looked up the menu at the restaurant and they're having chicken piccata today. And then you look at the trace and that fool didn't even look at the restaurant API. It just made it up, right? So that's one line of defense as a human. You can like look at traces, but you can also look at your evals in like after the run has happened. So like as you can see, like, oh, nice. This tone, this one's hallucination. This that customer quality, right? You can see the input, the output that came back, and the outputs here, and the score that it got. This is cool for many reasons. I mean, it's valuable because you can see it all. Hamill makes a joke that people spend too much time making like dashboards for their evals. So we were like, yeah, so we just gave you one so you don't have to make it yourself. But this allows you to track it over time. I could do more. I can do more prompts, and then we can start seeing it. Another cool and last kind of thing, which I'll wrap up, is in our agent, we have this thing called the instructions section. And here you can do like prompt enhancement, which would take your eval results and then go to well, we have like written a prompt judge that will like improve your prompt. Okay. So I'm just going to blindly take whatever evals we had. I'm going to enhance this prompt. It's going to put all the evals in there. And then, yeah, we'll just see what happens. And then the or workshop will open for questions. As you can see now, it changed the prompt. Whether you think that's a good prompt or not, it's up to you. I do personally. So I'm going to use it, but it doesn't mean that it will score. It might score better on the evals, but we don't necessarily know. In our version history here, I can see this is like the newest version. I will make it active. And so you can see that the analysis here is like we also have like I was saying, we have reasons too, right? It's a prompt judge. It gives you a reason why it made that choice. If you agree, you agree. Okay, cool. So now let's use it. Let's refresh the page. You can see that our instructions have changed. When quant, I mean, I'm not making the question any better, but we'll see. Okay, and then we'll have evals come in shortly. Should be like two of them. The tone consistency came right away because it's fast, right? It doesn't talk to an agent. But if I keep like spamming refresh, okay, now we have more, and then answer relevancy will come in last. I didn't look at the scores before, but I know my metric, the one that I wrote, is gotten better. So it must be because of me. But hallucination still 0, which is good. Tone consistency, I don't know if it went up, but if you're watching and paying closely, you would probably know. I think this one actually, I could actually look. Duh. So these are average scores. We actually went worse. And then, you know, we got worse somehow. That's the frustrating thing about all this. But in some ways, we got better. So in the things that we actually cared about, we got a lot better. So that's why off-the-shelf evals are trash in some ways. And that's it. That's all I will share. We'll open up for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go through just a couple quick in slides, and then we will have maybe time for a few questions. So feel free to drop some in the chat, and we'll try to get to them if we do have time. Let me share my screen quick. Okay, so where do we go from here? And just to reiterate, all the slides will be shared. The GitHub repo that with Abby's code will be shared, and we'll make sure we share the recording as well. So you'll get an email in a couple hours, whatever email you signed up with. So you will actually be able to then, of course, see all this stuff. All right, so you can see the slides, Abby. We're good. All right, so we have the evals docs. This walks through, again, gives you an overview on evals, how you could use them if you're using Mastra. Here's some further reading. These I would consider some kind of like foundational posts on evals. And so if you're just really trying to figure out, if you went through this and it felt like we were moving really fast, or it was, way over your head, just everyone's at a different point in learning all this stuff. I would refer to some of these posts. And even, to be honest, even some of these were over my head when I was first starting to read it. So just know that it takes time to figure this stuff out. At some level, evals are just tests, but they are different enough in a way where it seems very confusing. So again, evals are tests, but they do require some time and some effort to learn. And so if hopefully you all enjoyed this. I'm asking for if you all to help me out right now, help us out. If you can go to our GitHub and star it if you haven't already, that would be fantastic. We're trying to get to 13,000 stars, as Abby said, which would make Mastra more stars than I think any other related JavaScript AI thing that's out there right now. And we also have a waitlist for Mastra Cloud. It's mastra.ai/waitlist or /cloud beta. I think either way works. But you can join it. We'll give you early access to our cloud product, which we're going to be releasing very soon. And we also, which I didn't know was going to happen today, we have a launch on Y Combinator's launches page. So if you want to go upvote that, that would be also be very appreciated. Maybe Abby, if you want to drop that in the chat, if we have that handy somewhere. But with that, here's some links. There's the GitHub. Here's our website. Join our Discord. If you are getting into this stuff and you just have questions, we have a lot of people in our Discord that are just helping each other out. We're there almost every day. A lot of other people from the team are there. So if you just have questions on this stuff, it's a good place to go. It's a good place to get some support, get some help if you get stuck along the way. We have more events coming up. We'll be talking about RAG, how to build your first agent. Eventually, we'll have stuff on memory and tools and all these things that are kind of AI concepts. And then connect with us on Twitter. Find us on LinkedIn as well. Connect with us there. And yeah, any questions that we have? I see, Abby, you mentioned a few.
Yeah, I'll just one that wasn't answered. What is AI ops and are evals considered a part of it? AI ops is a made-up word for DevOps with AI on the side. So think DevOps plus AI stuff. So in a traditional engineering team, who would be responsible for paging and all that stuff based on evals going wrong? Or what if your agent starts going off the rails and all evals are starting to go trend in a way that you don't want, right? So evals are just another eval responses and scores are just another data point a DevOps person would be monitoring. So it's just DevOps.
Good question.
Great question.
And then there's a few others. How to estimate the LLM costs. So that is a good question. So any advice on Vim? That's going to be really hard because it does depend. One, depends on your application. A lot of your cost is going to be driven by user usage. If you have, an application that's more enterprise and it's only for a few users and you don't have that much usage, you're not going to pay that much for LLM costs. I'm assuming you're talking about the actual LLM cost itself, not costs of using Mastra. But if have something with very high usage, if you're building, Chat GPT or Perplexity or something like that, you're going to have a ton of costs, right? Which is could be a good thing as long as the economics work that you're making more from your users than it's costing you. But there
Yeah.
is definitely a lot of math that goes. I would look at the LLM models. They have like costs per token. You can start to do this math, but it is a calculation and it's not easy to understand today. It will get easier over time. There are more and more tools that are starting to come out to help you calculate costs. But just know that you're going to have to spend some time in a spreadsheet and probably think through some of those things and model some of these possibilities out. If you're talking about actual Mastra costs, the open source product is free. You can use it. You can deploy it anywhere. Our cloud product will, it's going to be pretty cheap. So you're not going to have a lot of costs there. Most of your costs are going to be towards the LLM.
Mastra Basics Workshop. Did we send that out? We can send it out, I guess. If you join
So
Discord, we'll put it there.
yeah, and if you go, so here's the calendar. You can subscribe to that calendar, get all the events. So next Thursday, we're going to run a build and deploy your first agent. So you can learn how to build a very simple Mastra agent and you actually get it deployed.
Yep.
All right, everybody. I appreciate you all coming today. And find us if you have questions. We're around, and we hope to see you at a future event. Have a great
All right.
day.
Peace.